It's like, no.
No. All right, Oz, welcome to the Men Made for More podcast. Really stoked to have you on here. I know we did an Instagram live way back when I was doing those, and stoked to have this one live on a little longer and get out in the podcast world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me again. I've been looking forward to talking to you again since we did that first one, and super excited today.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I know this one will be another good one. So I want to pass it back to you, just for the listeners that are not familiar with your story, giving an overview of yourself personally and professionally.
Absolutely. So, I've been in San Diego for my entire adult life. That's from 21 until now. I'm 43 now, but I grew up in Puerto Rico. Like, I didn't grow up here, and life out there is so different. Like, we didn't have a car. So everywhere you go, you had to walk. If you wanted to do something fun, you go out to the river. You had to hike a few miles there, a few miles back. So and it's really hot. So you take your shirt off a lot. So whatever you're doing, you gotta kind of look the part and be the part, because you have to either perform well or you got to look good. And so from a very young age, I was always like climbing trees, and most of our games involved some kind of running and tagging each other, and like, yeah, go here, go there, jumping fences, running away from animals and bulls in the country, because I lived up in the mountains. So it wasn't like a coastal beach area, but even my friends that grew up in the coast, they're surfing, their body surfing or something like that. Boogie boarding back then was very popular. I remember that. And so everywhere that you go, it's a lot of fitness all around, because, we didn't have the Game Boys yet, when I was at that age and stuff like that. Really no computers, until I went into the military. That's the first time I started using computers legit. So there were no these electronic devices. My life was really just about being out in nature, enjoying myself with my friends, and being able to be fit enough to enjoy that and not feel like a wreck the next day. Very, very quickly, I started to learn that I really loved movement in a way that was different from most people. So when I got involved with skateboarding around like 7 or 8 years old, I remember watching all the great skaters like doing this amazing things on TV, some of the films that VHS tapes that we could get, and they just looked really stylish doing it. And so I started to put together that a lot of the people that I admired, they moved in a way that was very beautiful and stylish, and it looked effortless. And why that, I didn't know that at the time. This will become a very important concept of my philosophy later on. And so just, I'm putting that out there so you guys can like kind of see the journey. And then from there, I went into martial arts. And that's when things started to really click for me in terms of like, some of my friends started gravitating towards like, oh, have you ever done like a bench press? Or they're having this more traditional, conventional way about becoming a fit teenager. And I'm thinking more in terms of like, I want to learn this Kung Fu set or that kick that I can't do. How do I figure out that kick? How do I figure out this move? And so it goes like that. And then I start boxing. And when I go to boxing, I start to figure out that I already had a lot of like skill, but where it comes from, I never boxed before. How did this come into play? So again, these are all things that I didn't realize at the time, but now they're a very important part of my whole system. And then from martial arts, I'm doing wrestling. And again, I go into wrestling and learning wrestling in those first 3 months, right? You don't learn wrestling in the first 3 months, but the basics of it, right? What you need that you will perfect for the rest of the time that you practice, quickly absorb it. So every time I learned something new, it seemed like I had like this stock of knowledge somewhere that I could call upon to learn the new thing, right? And that's when that whole thing about movement vocabulary started, which is very much an integral part of me as a professional and the way that I teach and I conduct my sessions and my training and all that. And then from there, I went on to really live the real personal stuff, joining the military, getting stationed in San Diego out of my first duty station, which was fantastic. Being in the military, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but it gave me a lot of experience in training people individually and trying to, really address what the obstacles and their limitations were, and again, I'll get more detail about that, but that's when I started more focusing from, learning and absorbing and filling up my glass, and then starting to share a little bit of that with other people that needed my help. Maybe they needed to lose weight. Maybe they couldn't pass their 2-mile run, or maybe they couldn't pass their push-up test, whatever it was. I was like, all right, I think I know what to do. And sure enough, things worked. So I was like, okay, cool. And then from there, when I got out, because I had been involved with all this fitness since a young kid and then in the military, it seemed like a natural progression to go and, like become a trainer. So I got a crappy certification, like most of us do the first time. And then I went on to start training in Hillcrest at the Powerhouse gym there. And that was very much like, those first couple years were very much like servicing people that just wanted to come in and be buff, So it was a very old school bodybuilding style type of approach, we're doing splits, back and buys, legs and shoulders, chest and tries, that whole thing people get like super stoked about. And we even had a 30-minute session that you could come in and do abs the whole time. Boy, how times have changed for me, right? So my evolution continued like that. It continued on the path of movement, right? So skateboarding, martial arts, boxing, wrestling, all of these things I started to think they have something in common. What is it? When I found it, I found myself being better at all of them, not just as the one thing. And then I began doing contemporary dance, modern dance here in San Diego. Danced professionally for about 3 years, went to Europe and everything else. So like legit, like was dancing with a company and traveling and everything, getting paid for it. It was really cool. Again, I picked that up a lot quicker than I would if I had just gone off the street and started, I want to dance, right? And then from there, I started to discover the geniuses of our time, Paul Chek, Gray Cook, Brett Jones, Pavel, and the list goes on. You know where I'm going with this now, right? And that's where everything just kind of came full circle for me when I started to see that it really is a lot about movement vocabulary, and that there are some basic things that we can do that can prepare us to better engage in whatever else we may want to do. And that has been the whole basis of my training philosophy ever since.
Yeah, I love you sharing that. And I know we get along so well too, because movement is the glue that holds these things together. And I love how you use movement vocabulary. And another previous guest on here, Drew Gallagher, talks a lot about movement literacy and defining movement and those things. And we get into that in a previous episode. So I'm excited to expand on that a little more and get your take, because so much of the fitness industry it's just like, it's grinding through it. We see no pain, no gain. We see dues paid. We see sweat angels. We hear all the time as they're these badges of honor that if you're not doing that day in and day out of the gym, then are you really training hard? Are you even successful, bro? If you're not things. So we think though that pushing harder and harder is the answer to more and more success when it comes to fitness. But I think we both argue there's a better way. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on why no pain, no gain has to be banned from a lot of people's vocabulary and why it's such a problem in the fitness industry today.
Yeah. From our perspective as professionals in the field, it's a matter of professional and personal responsibility, right? People come to us for direction. It's hard to justify anyone in our position prescribing that kind of mentality or promoting it rather, because when you walk into any gym, right? It's kind of hard now in COVID days, but if you walk into any gym and take a glance, you can see as a trained professional, probably right away, 20 people that you want to go over and start helping with, like, let me fix your form here. Let me fix your form there. Like, you're breathing properly. There's so much, but yet in a lot of ways, there's some very simple fundamental things that anyone can learn. I mean, these are not exclusive things that only professionals do. And so when you're prescribing people to just have this like go, go, go mentality, but they're not really prepared, they don't have the knowledge how to do it well enough, what are you doing? What exactly you're encouraging? To me, it sounds like you're encouraging poor form, you're encouraging, poor technique, and not being engaged enough in the moment when what you're doing that can potentially lead to an injury, potentially something that can follow you for life. So if we just take a step back and try to educate people on what, like, and like I said, this is, a lot of these things are not that hard. You take a couple of sessions, or we live in an age where there's so much knowledge out there. All you have to do is Google it or go on YouTube and look it up, and you will find some quality stuff out there. You may find some stuff that is a little bit not so great, but there's a lot of people like yourself who have like great education in this field that are putting out free content weekly, and so you can go in and look at what is good technique for this movement or that movement or whatever. And so avoid, and I think it was Gray Cook that said something to the effect of like slapping fitness on top of dysfunction or something like that. So that phrase comes to mind because you're thinking, okay, let's take something like a burpee, which is by its nature is done like repetitively, like ba, 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 set after set. And then you add on top of that, let's add some fatigue to that so that you can further break down your form. And then let's push 3 times further after you reach that point. At that point, what you're doing is not even really what was intended to be done with the burpee. The neural loops that you're utilizing, the muscle fibers that you're using potentially are different at that point because, like you fatigue a certain muscle to its max and then some others take over. People don't think of that, right? So if you're supposed to be doing something that is really explosive and you're doing it for way too many reps, then that's what you're encouraging. And to me, that's the mentality, right? It's like, you got to work really hard, but maybe we just have to work smarter. Because if we lay that groundwork up front, then we're setting ourselves up to do that hard work later. And here's the other thing. Even if we get there, let's say somebody comes in and they're a super good student, super good client. They're like, I'm going to do everything that you tell me. Great. You get them through a little program and they're moving fantastic. There's no pain, full range of motion, just good everything, right? Balance is good, vision is good, perception is good. And then we get to that point where we can unleash their performance. Rah! Are we going to continue to do that forever? Good science and good reason says no. We're going to undulate that. We're going to pull back and we're going to build back up stronger with more skills. Maybe the skills that we build now are perhaps a bit more complex than the ones that we started with before, right? So let's make an example. Let's say somebody comes in and they're the good student model, they're the good client model, and they learn to swing. And so for 3 months, man, they groove that thing and it's awesome. It's like just perfection. So crisp. This breathing is sunk in just right. When you look at it from a mile away, that is the kettlebell swing, right? Well, what can you do from there? Do more swings? No. Pull back, take a couple of weeks out for one, go to the beach, take a couple of walks, something, I don't know, go on vacation. Maybe you can do, one of my favorite things to do is, why don't we do a little body weight in between these loaded sessions, right? Take a couple of weeks, maybe 3, maybe a whole month. Let's just do some body weight. Just focus on some body weight. Make sure the patterns are still there. Nothing's changed. And then the next time, instead of working on swings, now we're working on snatches. Now we've made it more complex, right? And we keep doing this over time. Does it have to get boring? I don't think so. You could go on to doing double swings, double snatches, and all kinds of other ballistics and things like that. And furthermore, the work that you've done up to this point can probably prepare you to do a different activity altogether that is not in the context of traditional strength and conditioning protocols, right? Maybe you pick up jiu-jitsu and you find that you feel like a bag of bricks on the ground when you're on top of someone, and that is an asset to you. And where did you get that? You got it with kettlebells, right? And so on and so forth. So again, I talked about how having all these different modalities, the skateboarding helped, the martial arts with the stylistic form of moving, and then the martial arts helped understand pugilistic science better or boxing better, and then wrestling. There was this pattern of using what you learned before and applying it to what you learn next. And so these fitness protocols, they need to be able to do that if they really are going to enhance your life. If they're going to make you a very able and vibrant human being that can just go and engage in different things, whatever you want, right? Maybe it's even just for a short while, but that your body, tissues don't change in a day. They need long periods of time to adapt to the stresses that we put on them, right? So you got to have that discipline to apply what you've learned. And then when your body is resilient and it can express all that power, all that movement, that beautiful movement in different forms, then you can have fun with it. But there's going to be a period of adaptation that, it's inevitable, right? We can't rush these things. And there's a little bit of homework on your part as a practitioner, right? That you have to be willing to put in the work. And the frustrating part is that a lot of people are out there constantly posting things about put in the work, trust the process, but then they don't follow that mentality either. They don't follow that same advice. They want things to be really quick, and they want to, just jump from one thing to the other without allowing the process to truly take its course,
Yeah, I think there's so much good stuff. And I think the discipline's a big piece of it. I think people, they want more variety in their routines. They're not set on really mastering the basics, and the basics and those foundations are what will eventually lead you to really excel at those things that you're trying to excel at anyways. And for the average population, for most guys listening, I'm sure in general, what you want to look good, you want to look fairly good with your shirt off, you want to feel good, like the basics will still help you get there. You don't have to overcomplicate a program or push too fast. Those basics are what is going to allow for sustainability over time, less injury, less setback. We use the same thing of, if you, dieting is an easy example. If you pushing yourself in the gym is the same way. If you feel like you have to push yourself day in, day out, is similar to eating 1,200 calories a day for 6 days out of the week, but then you're so hungry on the seventh day that you absolutely stuff your face with the worst of things. It's like, okay, how much progress are we really making over the course of a week? And I think taking our lens back from, okay, how much better did I get this single week, to, am I getting better the next month, the next 6 months, the next year in those things? And why do you think it's so hard for people to see that big picture though, and to get so caught up in how many calories did I burn this workout? How hard did I push? What's the barriers that you see for that?
I watch a lot of sports, and I hear a lot the phrase, a prisoner of the moment. When commentators are talking about the performance of an athlete, and, oh, LeBron was amazing last night, he's the best in the world. He has a subpar game, not even a bad game, but a subpar game. And it's like, oh my God, he's declining, he's too old. It's like, just yesterday, he was the best in the world, right? So I think something has shifted. I don't know if this has ever been part of the collective mentality of our society. Okay. I really don't know. This is something that you and I have alluded to before, or talked about before. And that is that I have always seen the long term. I have a hard time not seeing the long term. So I suppose that as a society, we're just really short-term driven. I mean, it's, you can see some of that in our social media engagement, right? Like, it's every day you have to post that new thing. And so somehow that's permeated our real, and I hate to use that word, real lives, but you know what I mean? Like the face-to-face contact and the things that we do and how we do them. There's a lot of careers out there that emphasize this go, go, go too. It's a hectic environment, from training people, high-powered, executives that are like CEOs and CFOs, the heads of departments, and they're responsible for hundreds of people. They're the ones that work out at 5 a.m, and they're willing to share oftentimes, how busy their lives are. But everything in their lives is so fast, so that I think as a society, we have accepted that this is the way that it is, right? But I'll give you another platitude that gets thrown out there on social media all the time, and that is this whole thing about be the change, right? So I think that's an integral part of how I see myself as a professional, is to really live that life where I'm thinking ahead and making plans for the future, instead of just worrying about oh, I got to kill myself this week, I got to kill myself in this workout, but rather adopt that mentality of you know what, that last set didn't feel so great, I'm going to stop there. That's it. Session over. Why would I, only if I have this myopic view of things, will I force myself to do that next set, even if that last one didn't feel so great. But if I know that next week I'm going to train again, and the week after that, and the month after that, and sometimes I am reluctant to share this because it's a little crazy, but my plans for my own programs go to next week, they go to next month, they go to next year. And I'm even thinking about things that I want to do in 10 years. I've recently done things that I started practicing when I was way younger. I'm this close to doing a one-arm handstand, this close. And that's a goal that I've been working on for ages. Now, if I became a specialist and I did nothing but that, could I do it sooner? Sure. Would that be enjoyable to me? No. Will it be healthy? Potentially not. It's a lot of wrist and shoulder injuries that come with those professional hand balancers that can do that. So if I have to take decades to align my tissues so that they can sustain that load without me sacrificing anything else out of my fitness and the quality of my life, I'll do the decades gladly. So I still get to do the trick. And best of all, I get to go through that real process, man. When you're talking about doing something that takes a second, it's like, ding, okay, there it is, snap the picture, and you come down, and you're willing to work for it for decades. I think that tells something about the mindset of the individual, you know, how like committed they can be to a singular goal that they're going a bit roundabout about. And in the meantime, we're working on some things that are more applicable to where I'm at today. I got to be able to demo in class. So my skills as a kettlebell instructor, they have to be there. You know, my students will model what I do. My body weight stuff, they has to be there, you know. Now, not everyone's coming to me to do one-handed handstands, you know, but I have quite a few people that want to do pistols. So my pistols, they're present, constantly revolving around in the things that I do, right? But you got to be okay with having some things that are going to take a little bit longer and having some things that are just kind of like simmering. They're not super high intensity, but they keep you going. They keep you healthy. They provide that foundation that you can rely upon to do some of these other fun things in between. Right? And so that's not as fun as killing yourself for the next few days or killing yourself today in this workout. I think you know, that's a really interesting question. And I think it's one that pertains to the collective mindset of us as a society. Now, because when you get somebody in your gym, and they're or in your facility and they're having a really great time and seeing results, they start to shift their mindset to leaving that last rep in the tank and walking away from that, you know, that workout if it didn't feel so great, you know, like from that last thing. And so, yeah, I think, you know, it's the environment that you're in, and we are all in this environment collectively. So unless we get around similar mind-like people, right, that we can like, you know, like if you and I worked in the same gym, there will be no problem there, right? Because we have the same mentality, right? But if I go and start working out with people that are constantly doing 10,000 snatch or 10,000 swing, you know, challenges, and they are doing them like every year, twice a year, then I may be inclined to, you know, feel the pressure to be like, oh, I'm not going to be seen as a good kettlebell instructor if I don't do that, you know? So you feel that pressure, you know, of the group pressure, you know, to engage in these things that deep down inside, if you thought about it, as a professional, an educated professional that has gone through several certifications and has read books and has helped people, you know, become better, you will see that that's not the right answer.
Yeah, I think those pressures are dangerous, and those can be self-imposed. Those we talk about. There's benefits to all the free content out there. If we look at something like social media, there's a lot to learn from if you're willing to go down that route and learn it. But the dangers with that is you see where someone's at on their end of their journey. They see someone like you, say you snap a picture of your one-handed handstand and it's like, wow, I want that. And they don't see the thousands of hours that went into doing that, and the a lot less sexy things out there of mobility work and joint work and those things that are super important if your goal is sustainability. But people want to skip steps, and I think they want to take the shortcut. But we see it all the time. Then people will make this great progress for a few weeks, sometimes even a few months. People can get away with it, and then they crash and injury sets in, and an overuse thing. And I think some of this, we talked on some of the mental side of that and the importance of being able to check your ego and keep the long-term goal in mind. But what about the knowing progressions and regressions and knowing when to do these things? I think that's an important overlooked thing too, is that people see, we'll stay with the one single-handed handstand push-up, for example, or handstand hold, and no single arm handstand push-ups just yet, but that'll be your next thing.
I know. I was going to say, wow, that'd be something else, man.
Yeah, but they see this and they skip steps, and so what do they start doing? They start kicking their feet up against the wall and doing just straight handstand holds, and they start removing their feet from the wall, and they just think they're getting closer, but that's missing a lot of steps. And can you talk about, and whether you want to use that as an example, or pistol squat might be another easy example for people to understand, but what are some of the necessary progressions, regressions as it relates to physically of getting to goals appropriately?
Sure. You know, well, if you have the means to hire a professional, that would be a great thing. And there's a lot of great trainers out there, or, you know, there's a lot of physical therapists out there that do more like, you know, you have a more proactive approach right? Like it's a very different physical therapist than we had like 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And these people can set you on the right path because, as we've been alluding to this whole time, there are some basic fundamental things that you can learn and then you start applying. When you do that, they're going to start to light up light bulbs for you everywhere, or their dots are going to start to connect for you. And if you put a little bit of effort into it, which I think everyone should. I mean, look, people go to school and they get degrees and it takes them 4 years and they're okay with that. And then if they get a master's, that's another 3 years and they're okay with that. It's their time and it's their money. But somehow it's, it's not okay for them to think about their fitness a little bit, not even a little bit, just think, so when it comes to regressions and progressions, either you hire a professional that can help you with that and he can guide you through this, right? Because the most important thing is the assessment, right? Where are you at right now? If you have difficulties getting into a rock bottom squat on 2 legs, the pistol is probably not the best option for you, right? So it's really about understanding your limitations when it comes to what are the requirements, what is the criteria that this will require for me to perform in a proficient way, so that when I say proficient, what I mean is something that you can do and will not injure you. That's enough proficiency for me to allow someone to do it. If we're on the path to that, perfect looking pistol, I'm okay. You practicing, that's okay. But if you look like you're like an accident waiting to happen every time you get down, the past 90 degrees, then I'm going to be very stern about like, we got to stick to this level right here. That's the only thing that I can do in this facility. Because again, I hold myself responsible for the people that are training with me, that they have the right mindset, right? When it comes to progression, and this is something that I can sometimes perhaps be guilty of. Like I'm such a purist and I love the basics and the fundamentals so much that sometimes I can hold myself back a little bit perhaps, but that is a price that I'm willing to pay, because I rather err on the side of caution and not get injured and promote that longevity and feel as great as I do at my age now and continue to work on things that are really fun that I think this was going to happen when I was 20. I planned for it, but I really wasn't sure if it would, but I've been able to do that. And a big part of that is being prudent and just being very conservative about what I do. But yes, I think that there's always a right time for you to push yourself really hard. It's usually in a life or death situation. That's a great time to really like go all out. Okay. If you need to run from danger or fight off an animal or something, don't hold anything back. And then of course there's the platform, right? Like if you're competing and you've prepared and you've put in the time and you get to that point, then you go all out. In fact, Pavel alluded to this. Joe Rogan asked him, when would be a good time to go all out? And it's like, well, when the lifters are on the platform, they should be able to unleash their full performance 100%. In training, you should never go past that 90-95, because it's training. It shouldn't be. The adrenaline, the environment, just all of those things that the environment of that competition is going to elevate you a little bit more. Your nervous system will be a little more like fired up and you'll stay safe. This is just one attempt. But if you're consistently doing that every month at your training facility, then what you're doing to yourself is a disfavor, right? But you're not really promoting your performance. You're in fact inhibiting it, because we have a limited amount of that like go all out bottle. And I think people need to understand that. And then when you use it all up, it's gone. And that's it. You see it happen to fighters all the time when their chin goes, right? You get 10, 12 good UFC fights and you get 3 knockouts in a row and you're never the same fighter again. There's a little bit of truth to that. Do I know scientifically if that's true? No, I don't. But just from observing fighters throughout the years, not just in MMA, but in boxing and even some of my friends that I grew up like training with, all it takes is one bad injury to set you back and you'll never be the same. So being conservative and knowing when to say, I need to do a variation that maybe it's not as sexy, but it's necessary. I need this. And the thing is this, and I want people to take something away from today. It's like the process of fixing those things is not as long and as arduous as you think it is. Oftentimes, all it takes is a few good reps, and then you're on that path. And then you can get past your limitation in a heartbeat, you know? So it's a good investment that oftentimes it's not even that big of an investment, but for some reason it's so hard to just take that step back. I think you mentioned the ego thing. It's like, hey, look, and I really want you to focus on that, sumo deadlift instead of the swing, because the swing's looking a little, little off, and they don't want to do it. But if they did, all it might take is maybe a couple sessions, maybe within that session, you can cue them on the right thing. And then the next set of swings, okay, go try it again. And then it's back like, okay, good. That's what you need to feel, And for some reason, this is so difficult for us to do as a society. And I don't understand it, but it is.
Yeah. I love a lot of things you said there. And I want to circle back on some things. So I think this is interesting because there's so much of this back and forth with it because I like what you're saying that by pushing yourself and trying to go hard, you might actually limit your ability to go hard if you suffer an injury, if you go hard on swings or squats and your back flares up, or you go hard on doing a bunch of push-ups or burpees and your shoulder flares up, you're going to limit your body's ability to want to push hard the next time. Every time that injury or even just pain sets in, then you're actually limiting your potential to push hard because pain, your body's going to say like, whoa, last time we did this flared up. So I'm going to pull back the amount we're going to let your nervous system do. But I think the argument to that I can see from people that do have a hard time pulling back on the reins is that they hear being conservative, being smart, and they associate these things with being soft or not being able to get the mental benefit of training. So where, if you have any thoughts on the first part of going hard and then being able to limit yourself because of injury, but also the second piece of that I want to touch on is how do you train and push yourself mentally with your philosophy? Because a lot of people and I think I'm even guilty of that too. The reason I like pushing my training hard is for the mental benefit much more. I know there's not physical benefits to doing it, but to get to that discomfort is the only value that I personally see from that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of that.
Absolutely. So, to me, you really, there's an element of courage there, right? That, when somebody's willing or not willing, but able to just kind of like, in sports, they talk about the turning on the switch, right? Getting that killer instinct, Michael Jordan style, I'm going to finish the game, get that last shot, Kobe Bryant, that kind of stuff. Is that really something that we can train? I think that's the first question I want to ask. I don't think it is. I think we're either born with that or we're not. Okay. And the ones that have it, they know it, like I'm not that competitor. I never was. My competition days were very much the same way that my training goes. It's consistent grinding, and I just outlast you because you don't have the mental toughness that you're talking about. It's about me being able to say like, okay, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to wrestle with this dude. And my goal is to dominate him down to the ground and pin him without allowing him to do that to me. Now, I can't go onto that mat and somehow rationalize all these things. That had to happen in my training. All the numerous double legs that I did, hundreds of them, double leg. The conditioning, right? You're on doing your road work and you're thinking about the match. You're visualizing the match, how it's going to go your way. You doing the things that you want to do. And then, maybe not so much, but you can have some sessions where you're thinking about, what do I do when plan B goes out the door and I need to go to plans, B and C and D and everything, right? So you want to work through some scenarios. So it's mental work. Now, we were talking about this the other day, that if you are going to, and I'm kind of touching on all the different things that I've done, but if you really want to know if you know choreography, right? Something that a dance that you're in. Let's say you and I did a duet. It'll be awesome duet. Strength duet. And then I close my eyes, lying down on the floor. You have to be lying down, because when we're standing or sitting, we can do things to trigger our memory with our body. So you have to be lying down. Close your eyes and go through the entire dance. I got to be able to see what I do and what you do. That is an exercise in concentration. It can even be a form of like meditation, really. In martial arts, we are encouraged to do that as well. So you sit down on your knees, very traditional. Close your eyes and you run the kata or the form in your head from beginning to end without moving. That's concentration. That's focus. These are the things that you need for those special moments. It's concentration. It's focus. It's the ability to shut everything out and just This is normal. I've done this a million times. Nothing's different. People are yelling, lights are, bright, and we're going to lose the game if I don't do it. But it's the same thing. So the ability to focus on the task at hand can come from training, right? That can be practice and training by being consistent, by showing up on even by showing restraint. I think you can build discipline. The discipline that is the same discipline that will help you focus on the moment is the same discipline that's required for you to be, have restraint and not go all out all the time. And just know that what you're doing now are building blocks that are going to get you there. And there's no way to like amass that in some kind of weird bottle and unleash it at that moment. Only time builds that, right? Knowing that you have that mental discipline to stay in the moment. I think that's it, really, is staying in the moment, being more present, and doing what's now. It's practice. It's practice, guys, like Allen Iverson said. That's all we're doing right now. So just do the practice. That shows a lot of mental strength to me, because what you want to do is go hard, but what the coach is asking you to do, or the trainer or whatever, or maybe perhaps even yourself, it's be in the moment, do what's required of you right in this moment. And sometimes, most often, that's not 100%. So having the discipline to do that, I think, can permeate later on moments that are greater and bigger for you to say, okay, I'm just going to dominate this dude and not let him do anything to me, And, maybe if something hurts, maybe I pull my groin, maybe my neck gets a little kinked up in the middle of and what do? Oh, I did something. I remember a match. I don't remember the opponent, but it was GSP. And he's in the corner and he tells Faraz Sahabi, I think I pulled my groin. Or no, he said, I pulled my groin. And Faraz says, like, focus. This is what champions do. And in that moment, that's a good moment to go through that. But if you're just taking a little stroll through the park and you pull your groin, go back to your car, go home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I like that. I didn't, the way you said it was different from how I heard it, or at least interpreted. And cause I wrestle with that too, of the pushing yourself mentality of trying to build mindset, but it's the consistency and the discipline that builds that same mindset and that mental toughness and resiliency over time. Of if you're going head to head with someone in a single workout, it's like, okay, you might not win that one, but do you have the persistence and the discipline to take them on the next one and the next one, and months later, years later, 20 years later? That's the kind of discipline. And that's harder to see, where people, there's a lot of glory out there. There's a lot of heroification of people that can just push it hard in a single workout, or people from a work standpoint that can work 20 hours a day and they don't need sleep and these things, but all these things catch up. It's all these myths that we see that, and we're like, oh man, no, I want that. But that stuff isn't sustainable, for one, and two, doesn't necessarily build mental toughness, maybe in the best way that we can. Now, if someone is taking that approach, or someone's bought in, they're like, hey, yeah, no, I get it. Training sustainably, having the consistency. Are there some ways you use with yourself or your clients to boost up that top end percentage, though, still, in terms of maybe not working to the full 100%, but I would argue that a lot of people, they maybe say they're like, oh, I pushed that to 90% or 100%. And they were probably at like 80 or so. So are there strategies you use if someone is bought in on doing the right things for long-term, but are there other strategies you use to start to boost that top training level at least?
Yeah. Whenever we're dealing with that, I think taking good measurements, right? Like making good assessments in the beginning when you first intake someone, and especially if you know that that's their goal, right? If somebody comes to me and they're like, I want to increase my VO2 max so I can like be a better triathlete, that's a very measurable thing that we can do. I mean, obviously I can't do it in my facility, but I know the protocols that can help with that, and they can go get measured somewhere where that's, they have the equipment for it. So it's just really that initial intake. You need to take a really good history, and you need to take the right information so that you can measure that later. Did we improve? Right. So, we always, in Z Health, I think that now everybody uses this phrase. I don't know that it was a Z Health thing, but we say that if you're not assessing, you're guessing, right? So for me, anyone that comes in with a performance goal specifically, right? Because the underlying principle of my philosophy is that I want to make you perform better, because I can make you perform better. You're going to, move better. You're going to feel great. You're going to look pretty good. you're going to stay safe for a long time. But some people come and they're like, I want to get to that 95% that you were talking about. So measuring up front, what is the baseline that they can have, and then going forward with that, that's an important thing. Something that I'm actually going to start working on is my wife is going to become an SFG. So we're going to start training for her. So, she's trained with me for years. So, she's no stranger to kettlebell training. She could easily, be an instructor, and, I'm going to send her in like looking awesome, but she's going to have to pass that snatch test. Right. So we're going to make an assessment and see where she's at with her snatches. And then we're going to make her do it in a way, build it up until her certification in a way where she's not sore, her hands are not ripped. It's a very gradual progression. So you can get those 100 snatches with a 16 kilo in 5 minutes and walk away, no problem. That's my goal for her, right? So we take whatever her 90% is right now, which we're going to assess as a projection of a much lower percentage, right? So I'm going to be like, why don't you go for 5 minutes and try to give me 60 or 50? Go half. How'd that feel? How did her form look throughout that time? What was her tempo throughout the different minutes, right? And then I take all that information, I put it together, and I say, this is how we're going to build you up so that you can finish this 100 in 5 minutes and walk away 15 seconds early, just in case you get a couple no counts, and you're going to be ready to run a marathon if you want to. That's my goal. So all of those things go into it, right? Like legit measurements, the quality of the movement, its form breaking down, the tempo that they're keeping, all of these things can give you valuable information in assessing those things.
Yeah, really well said. And I think that's where people get confused, is they think that these things might not apply if they're training for performance, but these things do go hand in hand. It's not a matter of choosing between like, oh, well, I have to either feel good or I can perform good. And I talk about this a lot of we can have both. And it might not be pushing yourself to that 100% all the time, but you can over time build that top end percentage up and that top performance up by doing these things that we're mentioning, of training consistently, not pushing yourself to failure every workout or regularly, to focus on these proper progressions and regressions, to focus on making sure you have the basics nailed down and you're focusing on quality over quantity, and all these things play a role in helping your performance as well. So I think because would you say this applies even for the person that's like, hey, I'm trying to look better and I'm trying to get a little stronger and look a little better? I'd say these principles apply. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah. And to add to what you were saying, I think that earlier you had mentioned, when you're going head to head with another person in class. And I think the real question is, why don't you go head to head with who you were yesterday and who you are today? That is a much better like comparison to have, because in this whole thing of building mental toughness and, having courage and being able to rise up to these occasions where, we have to perform at an incredible rate. A big part of that is having the, just the self-respect and the self-love to know that the only person you should be competing with is yourself, unless you're going to like an actual competition. And in which case, most people that I know, like myself included, would view competition as like an ally, somebody that's going to help you discover something about yourself. That's very much an Eastern martial artsy type of way of looking at it. But, that's why fighters embrace in the cage after they're done fighting, because they appreciate that each one of them brought their absolute best, and even win or lose, you got to appreciate when somebody, just, meets you there in that environment, and just, and that's fantastic. That's beautiful, but that's rare. Fighting careers are short and, so are many other careers. And so being able to accept that the only person that you need to impress and compete with is yourself can go a long ways in giving you the right mindset, the right mentality, the feel good about what you're doing, that what you're doing is right, even if it's not at that high percentage all the time. And then on the second block, you were talking about the measurements and how do you go with the progressions and everything. I think it's important to note that you don't have to test yourself out to increase your base, right? So if you start, like, let's say the example with my wife, let's say she gets 60 snatches in 5 minutes when we test her sometime this week. And, when she goes to the cert, she comes back and she's like, I'm like, how was it? She's like, I didn't even go all out. I just got there in 4:30. let's just say. I'm like, wow, that's amazing, right? So the next time I test her, I'm not going to ask her to just go all out. Give me as many as you can in the 5 minutes. Just go at the same leisurely pace that you did last time and see how many you can get. Maybe she'll get 75 instead of 60. That will tell me, and it will tell her that, yeah, her baseline is a lot higher. So we can safely assume that her top end is a lot higher as well. Now that's for us mere mortals. If you're a professional, in some activity or sport, then you're going to have to test yourself a little bit more often. But again, I think that the idea of going to that 100% outside of competition is unnecessary and potentially dangerous.
Yeah, that's great. And I think for runners listening, this is a great example. And I heard this originally from, I think Mark Sisson might have talked about it, but for runners out there too, if it's the tendency, the natural tendency is, well, I'm going to max out my mile time or 5 mile time or half marathon time, pick whatever distance you want. And if you truly push to all out and you're huffing and puffing and dying and you do that regularly, you might go from say a 7 minute to a 6:58 to a 6:56 and it's debatable if you're even actually getting physically better versus can I make that mile feel easier? Can I run that mile with a lower heart rate without breathing through my mouth, with doing some of these things? And it's, if you go from, and maybe your first mile with that is 8 minutes or 9 minutes, but if you can maintain a certain lower heart rate and drop that down to 8 minutes, and then eventually 7:45 and 7:30 and 7, the progress is actually can be much more significant, and you can see a massive improvement in those things. And you can apply that, use running as an example. You can apply that to weightlifting, to all these things, but making the heavy weight feel lighter, even if you're not actually increasing the weight, is still progress.
I agree 100% with you on that one. In fact, I was thinking about it as you were talking about it. Like my goal oftentimes is can I make it feel easier? And to go to your running analogy, like when I was in the Army, I went in there thinking that I could run, but I really only jogged. Like that's all I did. I jogged. So having to run, my time was 11:56. I had to run under that time in order to max my PT test, get 100% on the score. And that's one of those miles has to be under 6 miles, and the other has to be 6 miles. So that's pretty fast. And I did it by the end of basic training, and I didn't do it by going all out like that. My drill sergeant, I call it the Sergeant Hopper protocol. So what you do is you run one lap at about like 90, 85% of what if you could do if you went all out, and you time yourself. And then you go, okay, now I'm going to double that time, run the second lap. On my third lap, I'm going to try to at least match that first run that I had. And you just keep doing that. Just keep doing that. And that's all we did. So it never felt like it was this incredible effort. And when I got to basic, when I got to my final PT test in basic, it was still challenging, but it felt easier to run that 11:52, which is what I ran, 11:52, 2 mile, than the first time when I ran 2 miles in 14:20, because I have never done that. And, I can pretty safely say that was pretty much like one of those dumb full out efforts because of the environment, like you're just like getting yelled at by drill sergeants. You're trying to impress people. You don't know what to do. It's your first test. I probably would have ran a better time if I had just calmed myself down. But I took off from the gate, and I probably just put myself in bad position to finish that race. Where later, when I had a better sense of my tempo, my timing, my pace, and how my body reacted to the 2 miles, I finished and I felt great. We're celebrating. I maxed it. Yes. Right. So that goes to your point about like, if it feels easier, that's a win, guys.
Yeah. And that's so overlooked. That's we think that the numbers have to reflect it, and it's okay to be goal driven. I'm all about setting goals. If you are chasing performance, and even if it's not competition, if it's really important to you and you find passion in lifting heavier weights, but make sure you're doing it appropriately, for one. But it's okay to chase numbers, but it's also okay to not beat yourself up when the numbers don't reflect. If you're doing quality training, the numbers might not always reflect that, but if you can lift 315 and make that feel like a 50% effort compared to a 75% effort, you are significantly stronger. And that's
Yes.
One thing to not overlook.
Yes. Well, it's like when you did the challenge and you did the 20 squats with was it 320?
315.
315. Okay. Like that. it's gnarly, right? Like, so, but you build that up, and, you know, when you got there, it may have felt, I can't even imagine how that felt. I will never know. I will tell you that right now. But I will say this, it looked good. Your form didn't like break down at any one of those reps. And when I watched that video, very low key, I'm just like looking like, come on, Dave. And the form was there, right? So those kind of efforts I'm all for, right? Or if you're gonna be the type of athlete that wants to engage in that type of like really high level, high percentage attempt, then do your mobility. If you get injured, do your rehab. Don't skip it. Get rest, get hydrated, have plenty of love in your life and a balance of friends and activities that you do, and have a very gradual approach to the way that you do it. And that's probably the safest way that you can be a person that is, you know, constantly like dipping their toes into that pool of like 90 to 95% and maintain that for a long time. Because we started this conversation talking a little bit about longevity and how you have to have this long-term outlook. Otherwise, you know, you pay the price for doing this incredible feats of strength. And this is something that we know from professional athletes. Their bodies are trashed oftentimes after they retire, or Olympians are notorious for this. And it's like, they're willing to do that because that's the ultimate, right? Like if you are an Olympic champion, that's, and that in that period of time, you were the best in the world, you know, ostensibly. So, you know, I mean, I don't know. That's, I guess that's a certain mentality that some people have, but if you're just X guy at X CrossFit, then do you really have to push it that hard? What is there to be gained from that? You know, and linking it back to, you know, being courageous and having discipline and being a person of integrity, right? That all these things matter too, right? Because this is about being a better human being, not just about, you know, trashing some records in your frat house when you're in college and then, oh, my baddest bag, I can't help you move. You're a bad friend.
Yeah, I think that's something you nailed it. And it's most people, you have to take an honest reflection. If you can weigh out those risks and rewards and say like, hey, yes, this is worth it. I'm training for this specific sport, this thing. But most people, and I guarantee you, almost all people listening are not in that category. If you take an honest self-reflection, being the best at your CrossFit gym or being the best at that stuff is great. But I would argue there's ways you can probably do that without pushing your body to the way that you might be currently doing it. Because if you break in 10 years and you can't help your friends, if you can't help your family, if you can't be there as the father and the brother you need to be, then you're not really being courageous. You're not being a hero in those cases. You actually might be sacrificing your long-term ability to live out your calling, to be there for your family, to do those things that are the reason most of us are here. And I think that's a hard wake-up call for some people to hear, though.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree. Yes. You know, you mentioned that, you know, the hero thing, and it reminds me of, we can tie this back to how often should you do that max level thing, right? And we're talking about, you know, if you're a competitive person, you know, you know, how many world championships could you potentially win, right, in a career? If, I don't know, depends on the sport, right? But let's focus on the like more like strength sports, right? So in the movie Deadpool, when Colossus tells him, 5 times or something like that, and he's like, 5 what? He's like, be a hero. It's only 5 times. Like, you're not walking around a hero. You don't brush your teeth a hero. You know, you don't like go to the store a hero. Like, there's just a few times that you do these incredible things, and then that's it. You want to save those efforts for the stage, for the competition, for when you're in these situations that it's really going to mean something. The rest of the time, you don't have to sacrifice the quality of your career if you are in that competitive nature to experience some success. Because again, you alluded to, what's the quality of your life going to look like in a few decades? You know, if we could stretch it even more than that, because I think a lot of people perhaps maybe like 20s, early 30s, so they can't see that far. But what about when you're like 60 or 70? And how, you know, are you going to be able to enjoy your life, or are you going to be broken? Because if you have people already like alien and like, oh my God, I can't do anything, and they're not even like 40 yet, like, you got to question like, well, shit, man, like what are you going to feel like when you're 60 at this rate, unless you change your philosophy? And I should say that there's always time to change. No matter what you've done, you can always repair. Your body's very resilient. So no matter what you've done, you can always make some changes and restructure some tissue and fix some patterns and be a little bit smarter. And you can have a higher quality of life well into, your late years.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder for people too, is they think, well, it might be too late, or I won't be able to push myself at all if I take these steps back. And your body is amazing at adapting to whatever stimulus you're giving it or not giving it, and has an incredible way to heal itself and to repair. And there might just be, a lot of people that worry about, well, I don't want to lose that push myself side of things. I enjoy that feeling. There's just smarter ways to do it too. There's ways that you can use intervals and pick movements that are high quality type movements, where if you're not a good squatter, but you have a really good hinge pattern, like use that as more of the conditioning stuff. Push a sled, get on an assault bike, like do some of these lower skill movements. If you're really looking for that, there are some ways to do that without necessarily doing a high rep barbell snatch workout, which is a very challenging and complex movement.
Yeah. I never understood the reasoning behind trying to make that into a conditioning exercise, because I enjoy watching the Olympics and I love at least seeing these lifters do this incredible feats. But yeah, that's one rep, man. That's one perfect rep, and then, when you start adding volume and fatigue to that, you're not only putting yourself at risk, but you're almost like desecrating the movement. You're making it look so ugly. It's like a shameful way to present this, like this is such a beautiful expression of power and athleticism, let's let it be what it was meant to be. Let's not turn it into something else.
Yeah. And that gets back to where we started with movement vocabulary and knowing that it's not enough for a barbell snatch to just simply be, okay, I'm picking it up from the ground and I'm ending up with the bar overhead. Like there's a lot more to it, and being able to find what your goal is, what the movement is, what you're trying to accomplish. There's, as we've seen, a lot of kettlebell swings can look different person to person, and some swings in quotes, some swings as actual swings, but that's until we define what that proper movement pattern is, it can leave a lot of room for misinterpretation of the movement.
Yeah. It's like my favorite coach of all time, Brett Jones, said, anyone can swing a kettlebell, but not everyone can do the kettlebell swing. Right. And I think anyone can just throw a bar overhead. Not anyone can do the barbell snatch, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So true. I got to get Brett back on here sometime if he's.
Yes, that would be fantastic. I would love to hear him. I know he's been doing a lot of stuff, so maybe it's a good time to ask.
Yeah. Just great stuff today. I always love talking to you, and I'm so excited for people to hear this one, and so much good stuff in it. And I want to transition here as we work our way to the close. And when I initially approached you with the idea, as did with all the guests that I sought out to have on here, I was excited about having you on here. And but a big thing that, while we love the fitness side of things and we can talk health side of things all day long, I also want this to be a place for men to be real with each other. And I think that's when we talk dangers of social media earlier in the podcast and all these things of appearances, it's easy to see someone like yourself who's so fun to be around and energetic and knowledgeable and passionate and running a successful business and seeing these things. And it's easy to get caught comparing to someone else, to thinking that, oh, they have it all together. And like I say with all of our guests, you and I both know that's not the case. And that couldn't be further from the truth, that our journeys have been challenging, had ups and downs and all these things. So would love, if you don't mind being real with the listeners, if you can share a challenge maybe you're going through as a man, either currently or something you've gone through in the past that's ended up being a real catalyst for your growth as a man yourself. Yeah.
So this is like really personal, and I don't think it's something that we got to in the first time that we talked, but I'm really happy to share it because it's important. So even though I've been in the fitness industry for about 15 years, because I went right into it right after I got out of the Army in 2004. And I picked up, right with the kettlebells and all that, like the timing of it was fantastic. Like I started doing things that weren't really popular at the time, and I was able to reap some early success with that. And I felt pretty good about myself. And then shortly after that, I started dancing for the company, Mojale. And, I'm like being asked like, oh, you want to come to Europe with the company? I'm like, are you serious? Like I felt pretty good about myself, let's just say, right? And then I decided that the challenge for me that I wanted to fulfill was to get a degree. I wanted to get a degree. Education was very important to my family. It was like put into my head, like, you need to get a degree, you need to get a degree, which by the way, I no longer think this is like good advice, but, but for me it was, for the way that I grew up and where I came from, it was good. I needed to do that, and I did. And that was very challenging, but that really wasn't the challenge. So, once we closed the first Iron Core about 2011, closed it down, and I was just about going into my last year of college. And school was hard, struggling with my 4 final higher level accounting classes. I had like fraud investigation, advanced accounting, advanced partnership taxation, and some other thing, and I was like, tough. Get out. The economic downturn like hit right about that time. So then I can't find a job. And I'm doing all these free internships just to get some experience, do whatever. And it was just a grind, man. Every time one of those like emails came back, we regret to inform you, we're not going to pursue you anymore as a candidate, or something like that. Or sometimes you don't hear at all, and you're just calling like, hey, I just want to check on my application or something. Those were trying times. Like, I remember specifically one time I was sitting at Lestat's on El Cajon Boulevard, and I'm having a coffee, probably the last like $3 that I had on my bank account. And I'm sitting there and I get this email, and I had just been putting all of my energy into, hopefully I get this one. I really needed this. I'm like out of money. I don't know what else to do. And I didn't get it. And I just sat there and I was crying, like straight up, like just like, I don't know what to do. Like, I just didn't know what to do. And this went on for a long time. And eventually, of course, as always it happens, things turn around. You get that one big break. And, in my case, in accounting, I never had a big break. I just had breaks. But I did get a job, and then I got a little bit of a better job, and I moved to Texas briefly. And then I came back to San Diego, and eventually I ended up getting enough experience in the field to where now I feel a very competent business owner. So I think the lesson there is that maybe, something is very difficult. School, finishing it was extremely difficult. I didn't feel accomplished or successful. I didn't feel accomplished, successful looking for jobs and getting all that rejection, tons of it. I think that at one time I was looking through my old emails. I had a folder. I would drop every application that I had put in, and it was like over 200 jobs. That's 200 like no's that you have to deal with emotionally and feeling like, but if you keep like just trusting in that, like, I put in this work, things will work out. And that's the discipline, right? Because that you don't see the big number right then. There wasn't the big salary or the big offer or anything like that. I had to just keep doing the little fundamentals along the way, very much like we were talking about earlier. And that paid off for me in the long run, because I had some awesome jobs. And most importantly, now I feel like there's nothing I don't know about my business. In fact, I've been thinking about doing a course for personal trainers, like how to run your business. Here's how to do a forecast. Here's how to do your income statement and your cash flow and all of that stuff. So it was worth it in the end, but it was a trying time.
That's so great. I really appreciate you sharing that, man. And that's tough, because for you, that was that situation. For a lot of listeners, they've gone through something similar. I'm sure. I know I have, and have plenty of examples of that, where the learning that you're gaining during that, though, and I do believe that it's being worked out for our good, and that the learning and the challenges and those trials are what is going to eventually propel you to something that you might not be able to see right now, but that you'll be able to use in positive in some way for yourself, hopefully, but more importantly for others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, it's important.
Yeah, that's so great. And I want to give three summaries here to take away from at least some of the things that I wrote down. And as always, I did write down way more than 3, so I have to try and prioritize what the top 3 were. And I end up just combining a couple of them into one point to make it work. I'm not good at really prioritizing down, but one of the first things is, so don't let nearsightedness keep you from reaching your long-term goals. It's knowing when to go hard and when to back off is super important. It's the competition is against yourself and who you were yesterday, not against someone else. I love when you said that. Another thing, second point, is invest in your fitness and your health like you do in school and career and finances. I loved hearing that. I don't think I heard it quite like that before. And we're so willing to throw money and time and these things at these things that are important for sure. Don't get us wrong, but our fitness and our health is what's going to help us to show up for those around us, especially as we talk sustainability. And then last piece is the mental toughness is not necessarily pushing yourself and going hard every workout, but it's the consistency and the discipline over time. And I think that's something that I hope we reiterated, because that's something that is super important. And mental toughness doesn't have to be pushing yourself in isolation, but how do you do that day in, day out for years and years and decades? So love that. Anything you want to add to those points? I know we talked about a lot of good things, but anything that stand out to you?
No, you know me. If I start talking again, it'll be another 15 minutes. So yeah, I think you did a great job. Look, you summarized really well. That was great.
Well, that was like 6 points I wrote down that I like pick and choose and combine a couple of them. Like those go hand in hand enough to make it 1 point. So love it. Awesome.
I won't judge you for that. I think it was wonderful.
Cool. So last thing today, this is our hypothetical scenario, asking all the guests that come on here, and we're saying that you're leaving your favorite coffee shop and you run into your younger self of 10 years back. So younger you ask current you for some life advice. You're on your way to a super important meeting. You only have 60 seconds to talk with him. Yes, I'm holding you to 60 seconds here, Ross. What advice are you giving him, and what do you
I need a cat.
Yeah. You need an actual timer here.
All right. So I think that if I ran into my younger self, what I would tell him is to trust his gut instincts, because I learned that later, about late 20s and early 30s. That's when I really started to get in sync with what that should feel like, because I had a friend that passed away and we had a lot of time to talk while, he was, going through the process. He had ALS, and he said, if you remember nothing from our conversations, remember to trust your inner voice, your instincts, because they're usually right. And after that, it was hard to ignore that. And then once I started to apply it, my life turned around like big time. Like the quality of my life and my disposition was completely different. And even though you can think like, well, you were late 20s, that's not so late. That, let's say it was 27, that's 7 years, potentially between 20 and when I came into the Army, and 20, or rather 21 and 27, that I could have made different choices, And so I think that that's important to just trust your instincts, and just recognize that that's a real thing. It's not some hippie stuff from California guys like you and me.
No, that's great. Awesome advice. And I think we can all agree that that's something that we can get away from. So thanks for sharing that. This was awesome, man. I really appreciate you being on here. Where can people find you? Where can they reach out to you?
Yes. So our website is ironcoreway.com. And there is all the information for our locations, including the one in Oceanside, which we just opened June 1st. A very nice facility, about 2,800 square feet, kettlebells, body weight. Anyone that follows me on social media will know, which by the way, that is the Instagram feed is Iron Core Way. And we just opened one for the facility that's Iron Core Oceanside. So that one is more about, showcasing clients and just being a little bit more lighthearted, where the Iron Core Way is more about the hardcore philosophy behind what we do and how we do it. And then our YouTube channel is the Iron Core Way channel. And that one is more educational. So I post a lot of technique bits in there, I have a pistol tutorial in there. It's like 30 minutes. It covers everything. It's basically like a program. It's free. Go watch it. Things about the dead cleans and snatches and things like that. So probably the best resource that I have so far out there that is completely free that anyone can access. But yeah, those are all of our mediums to reach out into the community.
Yeah. I highly recommend people checking those channels out. A lot of good free content there. You take thousands and thousands of hours and dollars worth of investments and package them into easy to understand things. So that's awesome. You're sharing that. And I appreciate you being on here. Had a lot of fun and excited for people to listen to this one, and hopefully it impacts them positively.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on.